The dust swirled across the weathered porch of Hollister's General Store as Katherine Fletcher stepped down from the stagecoach, her gloved hand clutching a letter that had brought her all the way from Boston to the rough mining town of Virginia City, Nevada. The year was 1876, and while the rest of the country celebrated its centennial with grand exhibitions and festivities, Katherine had come west with nothing but a teaching certificate, a trunk of modest belongings, and the promise of a new life far from the whispers that followed her after her father's financial ruin. "Miss Fletcher," a voice called out as she squinted against the late afternoon sun. The town sprawled before her, a collection of wooden buildings lining the main street, the distant sound of piano music floating from a saloon, and the imposing silhouette of mountains that seemed to touch the sky. "Yes, that's me," Katherine replied, adjusting her bonnet as she searched for the source of the voice. Martha Hollister, a stout woman with kind eyes and practical manner, emerged from the store. "Welcome to Virginia City. I'm Martha Hollister, head of the school board. We've been expecting you." She gave Katherine an appraising look. "You're younger than we thought you'd be." Katherine straightened her spine, all too familiar with being underestimated. At 22, she had graduated at the top of her class from the Boston Teachers College, but her age often made others question her capabilities. "I assure you, Mrs. Hollister, my age has no bearing on my qualifications." She produced her teaching certificate from her reticule. "I've been well trained for the position." Martha's expression softened. "No need for that, dear. We're just grateful you came. After our last teacher left to get married, the children have been running wild for months." As they spoke, a commotion erupted further down the street. A group of men burst from the Silver Dollar Saloon, their shouts drawing attention as they circled two figures in the middle of the dusty road. "Fight's broken out again," Martha sighed. "That's Nathan Blackwell's ranch hand getting into it with one of the miners." Katherine tried not to stare, but found her gaze drawn to the scene as a tall man on horseback approached the fight. Even from a distance, there was something commanding about his presence. His broad shoulders were set beneath a worn leather vest, and a hat shaded his features as he dismounted with fluid grace. "That's Nathan Blackwell himself," Martha explained. "Owns the biggest cattle ranch in the territory, not a man to cross." The rancher stepped between the brawlers with an authority that required no shouting. A few words from him, and the fight dispersed as quickly as it had begun. As he turned, Katherine caught a glimpse of his face, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes as deep and blue as the Nevada sky. "He's on the school board too," Martha added. "Had a hand in hiring you, actually. Read your references and said we'd be fools not to bring you west." Katherine felt a flutter of something unfamiliar at this revelation. I'm grateful for the opportunity." "Well, let's get you settled. The school teachers' quarters are behind the schoolhouse. It's not much, but it's private." As they made their way down the street, Katherine was acutely aware of Nathan Blackwell's gaze following her. It wasn't the leering look she'd received from men in Boston, but something more assessing, more thoughtful. When she risked a glance back, he tipped his hat slightly in acknowledgement. Martha noticed the exchange and smiled knowingly. "Mr. Blackwell doesn't impress easily, but something tells me you've caught his attention." Katherine felt her cheeks warm. "I'm here to teach, Mrs. Hollister, nothing more." "Of course, dear, of course." The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building with rows of benches and a potbelly stove in the corner. Behind it was a small cabin that would serve as Katherine's home. It was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a writing desk, a small cookstove, and shelves for her books. "School starts Monday," Martha informed her as Katherine surveyed her new quarters. "That gives you the weekend to get settled. We've got 12 children enrolled, ages 6 to 16. After Martha left, Katherine sat on the edge of her bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what she had done. Boston, with its familiar cobblestone streets and cultured society, was thousands of miles behind her. Here, in this wild, untamed place, she was truly alone for the first time in her life. She unpacked her trunk methodically, placing her modest collection of books on the shelves: Shakespeare, Emerson, several volumes on mathematics and natural philosophy, and well-worn copies of novels by the Bronte sisters. She arranged her teaching materials on the desk and hung her dresses in the small wardrobe. As night fell, she lit the oil lamp and began writing her lesson plans for the coming week. The sound of horses and men's voices occasionally filtered through her window as the town continued its evening business, so different from the genteel quietude of her family's home in Boston before everything had changed. A knock at her door startled her. Cautiously, she approached it. "Who is it?" "Nathan Blackwell, Miss Fletcher. I've brought your trunk from the stage-coach office." Katherine opened the door to find the rancher standing there, her large trunk balanced easily in his arms. In the lamplight, she could see his features more clearly, the weathered lines around his eyes suggesting a man in his early 30s, the strong set of his mouth, and those remarkable eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed composure. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. You didn't need to trouble yourself." "No trouble." He stepped inside when she moved aside, placing the trunk at the foot of her bed. "Wanted to welcome you properly to Virginia City. The school board's mighty pleased you accepted our offer. I'm grateful for the opportunity." She clasped her hands in front of her, suddenly aware of her simple traveling dress and loosened hair. Nathan's gaze took in the books she'd arranged. "Quite the collection you've brought. Shakespeare fan?" "Yes. Literature is a window to understanding human nature." She was surprised by his interest. "Do you read much, Mr. Blackwell?" A smile touched his lips. "More than most cowboys, though that's not saying much." He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair. "My mother was a school teacher back east. She made sure I appreciated books before she passed." Katherine felt her preconceptions shifting. "I'm sorry about your mother, long time ago." He placed his hat back on his head. "I'll let you get settled. Town's having a social on Saturday night at the church. Good way to meet folks before school starts. Thank you for letting me know." At the door, he paused. "Virginia City's rough around the edges, Miss Fletcher, but good people here. Still, a lady alone should be careful. My ranch is just 3 miles north if you need anything." With that, he was gone, leaving Katherine with the lingering impression of his height, the clean scent of soap beneath the leather and horses, and the way his presence had filled her small cabin. She returned to her lesson plans, but found her thoughts drifting. In Boston, after her father's disgrace, men had either avoided her for fear of association with scandal or approached with dishonorable intentions, knowing her reduced circumstances. Nathan Blackwell had done neither. He'd looked at her as if she were simply a person worth knowing. Saturday evening arrived with a flurry of nervous preparation. Katherine chose her best dress, a blue cotton with modest lace trim, and pinned her hair in a style that was neat but not too severe. She wanted to make a good impression on the parents of her future students. The church social was already underway when she arrived. Lanterns hung from the rafters of the simple wooden church, which had been cleared for the occasion. A fiddle player and a man with a banjo provided music, while tables laden with food lined one wall. Children darted between adults, and several young men stood awkwardly to one side, watching the unmarried women with interest. Martha Hollister immediately took Katherine under her wing, introducing her to what seemed like the entire town. The miners, shopkeepers, and ranchers' wives regarded her with curious friendliness, while the children eyed their new teacher with a mixture of shyness and assessment. "And this is Sheriff James Connolly," Martha said, introducing a graying man with kind eyes. "He keeps order as best he can." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Fletcher," the sheriff said with a tip of his hat. "My boy Tommy will be in your class, smart as a whip but full of mischief." "I look forward to teaching him," Katherine replied sincerely. As the evening progressed, Katherine found herself enjoying the simple pleasures of the gathering. The food was hearty if plain, the music lively, and the conversation refreshingly direct. No one seemed to care about her family's past or her father's fall from grace. Here, she was simply the new schoolteacher. She was sampling Mrs. Hollister's apple pie when a murmur ran through the crowd. Nathan Blackwell had arrived, accompanied by a handful of his ranch hands. He looked different in his Sunday best, a clean shirt, vest, and string tie, but no less imposing. His eyes found hers across the room, and Katherine felt that same flutter she'd experienced when they first met. She nodded politely and returned her attention to her pie, though she remained acutely aware of his movements through the crowded room. "Looks like Nathan's made a special effort tonight," Martha commented beside her. "He doesn't usually come to these gatherings." "I'm sure it has nothing to do with me," Katherine said primly, though her cheeks warmed. Martha just smiled knowingly. When the dancing began, Katherine declined several offers from eager young minors, preferring to watch from the sidelines. Dancing had never been her forte in Boston, and she feared making a spectacle of herself. "Not much for dancing, Miss Fletcher." Nathan's voice came from beside her. She turned to find him leaning against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. "I find I'm better at teaching it than performing it, Mr. Blackwell." "Fair enough." He nodded toward the dancers. "Different from the fancy balls back east, I imagine." "Refreshingly so," she admitted. Less concerned with appearances and more with genuine enjoyment. He studied her with those penetrating eyes. "You don't strike me as someone who puts much stock in appearances yourself." "Perhaps not now." She smoothed her skirt. "But Boston society has different expectations. One learns to conform or face consequences." "And what consequences brought you all the way to Virginia City?" Katherine stiffened. Had he somehow heard about her father? "I wanted to make my own way," she said carefully. "The West offers opportunities not available to women in the East." Nathan seemed to sense he'd touched a nerve. "Well, we're glad to have you. Children need proper schooling, especially out here." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the punch table. Two minors, clearly having supplemented the punch with something stronger, were arguing loudly. "Excuse me," Nathan said, straightening. "Duty calls." He strode toward the disturbance, arriving just as Sheriff Connolly did. Together they escorted the rowdy minors outside. Katherine was impressed by the calm authority both men projected. When Nathan returned, the dancing had resumed. He stopped before her with a slight bow. "Would you honor me with a dance, Miss Fletcher?" She hesitated, surprised by the request. "I warned you I'm not very skilled." "Then we'll take it slow." He extended his hand. Something about his steady gaze made refusal impossible. Katherine placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her to the dance floor. His hand at her waist was respectful but firm, and she found herself following his lead with unexpected ease. "You're doing fine," he said quietly as they moved to the simple waltz. "Just trust your partner." "Is that your advice for life in Virginia City as well, Mr. Blackwell?" she asked, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened at their proximity. He smiled, the expression transforming his stern features. "Not bad advice anywhere, I'd say." They completed the dance in silence, but Katherine was intensely aware of every place their bodies connected, of his scent leather and soap, and something uniquely him, and of the way other dancers glanced their way with interest. When the music ended, he escorted her back to the side of the room. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Fletcher." "Thank you for not mentioning when I stepped on your foot," she replied with a small smile. He laughed, a rich sound that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "I've had worse from ornery steers." The evening wound down shortly after, and Katherine prepared to walk back to her cabin. Nathan appeared at her side as she bid good-night to the Hollisters. "I'll see you home, Miss Fletcher," he said, in a tone that invited no argument. The night air was cool after the warmth of the church, and Katherine wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders as they walked. The stars blazed overhead, more brilliant than she'd ever seen in Boston. "It's beautiful here," she said, gazing upward. "So vast." "Takes some getting used to," Nathan replied. "Some folks find it overwhelming. Too much space, too much silence." "And what do you find in it, Mr. Blackwell?" He considered her question seriously. "Freedom, room to breathe, to be judged by what you do, not where you come from." His words resonated deeply with Katherine. Wasn't that exactly what she had sought in coming west? They reached her cabin too quickly. She paused at the door, turning to face him. "Thank you for escorting me. My pleasure." He stood with his hat in his hands, looking as if he wanted to say more. Finally, he spoke. "Some of us are riding out to Pine Lake tomorrow after church. Clear water, good fishing. You'd be welcome to join." Katherine was tempted. The idea of exploring her new surroundings appealed to her, as did the prospect of spending more time with Nathan. But propriety dictated caution. "That's very kind, but I should prepare for classes on Monday." Was that disappointment that flickered across his face? "Of course, another time, perhaps." He replaced his hat. "Good night, Miss Fletcher. Good night, Mr. Blackwell." Katherine watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the starlit street. She entered her cabin and leaned against the closed door, her heart beating a strange rhythm. In just 2 days, Virginia City and its most prominent rancher had already begun to affect her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Monday morning brought a mixture of excitement and trepidation as Katherine stood before her classroom for the first time. 12 children of varying ages regarded her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. "Good morning," she began, writing her name on the blackboard. "I am Miss Fletcher, and I'm very pleased to be your new teacher." A boy of about 12 raised his hand immediately. "Miss Fletcher, Billy says you're from Boston and you probably don't know anything about real life out here." Katherine raised an eyebrow. "And you are Tommy Connolly, madam, sheriff's son." "Well, Mr. Connolly, it's true I have much to learn about life in Nevada territory. Perhaps we can teach each other. I'll teach you reading, writing, arithmetic, and history, and you can teach me about your home." This approach seemed to satisfy them, and Katherine proceeded with assessing their current knowledge. The older students had a solid foundation, thanks to their previous teacher, while the younger ones needed more attention. By noon, she had established a tentative rapport with most of them. As the children ate their lunch outside, Katherine noticed a rider approaching the schoolhouse. Her heart skipped when she recognized Nathan Blackwell. He dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post, then climbed the steps to where she stood. "Miss Fletcher," he greeted her, removing his hat. "Thought I'd check how your first day is progressing." "Very well, thank you," she replied, conscious of the curious eyes of her students watching them. "The children are bright and eager to learn." "Good to hear." He glanced at the playing children. "Which ones are giving you trouble?" Katherine smiled. "Now, Mr. Blackwell, what kind of teacher would I be if I revealed that so soon? I have to establish my own authority." He nodded approvingly. "Smart approach." He hesitated, then added, "Actually had another reason for riding by. There's a shipment of books coming in on Thursday's stage." "Ordered them from San Francisco for the school." Catherine's eyes widened. Books? What kind of books? McGuffey readers, arithmetic textbooks, atlas, some literature. Thought they might help. That's incredibly generous, Mr. Blackwell. He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed by her gratitude. Education matters, especially out here. Before she could respond, the church bell began to ring, not the measured toll that marked the hour, but a rapid, urgent clanging that immediately brought a frown to Nathan's face. "Fire," he said tersely. "Get the children inside and keep them here." He was on his horse and galloping toward town before Katherine could reply. She quickly gathered her students, counting heads to ensure everyone was accounted for. "What's happening, Miss Fletcher?" asked Sarah Hollister, Martha's 10-year-old daughter. "There may be a fire in town," Katherine explained calmly. "We'll stay here where it's safe until your parents come for you." From the schoolhouse window, she could see smoke rising from the direction of the main street. The children whispered among themselves, excitement and fear mingling in their voices. An hour passed before Martha Hollister arrived, her face smudged with soot. "Fire's under control," she reported. "Started in the assayer's office, but they managed to stop it before it spread to the whole block." "Was anyone hurt?" Katherine asked. "Minor burns, nothing serious. Nathan Blackwell organized a bucket brigade faster than anyone could blink. Man's got a knack for taking charge in a crisis." Martha began gathering the children. "Parents are coming for the others, but I'll take these 5 with me now." By late afternoon, all the children had been collected, and Katherine found herself drawn toward town. The acrid smell of smoke hung in the air as she approached the damaged building. Men were still clearing debris, and she spotted Nathan directing the efforts, his shirt sleeves rolled up, face and arms blackened with soot. He noticed her and made his way over. "Everything all right at the school?" "Yes, all the children are safely with their families." She surveyed the damage. "This could have been much worse. Lucky the wind wasn't up." He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief, leaving a clean streak through the grime. "Fire's the biggest danger in these wooden towns. You were very brave, organizing everyone so quickly." He dismissed her praise. "Just doing what needed doing." He glanced back at the work crew. "I should get back. See you tomorrow, Miss Fletcher." Katherine watched him return to the cleanup efforts, struck by the natural leadership he displayed. The people of Virginia City clearly respected him, and she was beginning to understand why. The following days fell into a pattern. Katherine taught her students during the day, prepared lessons in the evening, and gradually settled into life in Virginia City. Nathan stopped by the schoolhouse occasionally, always with some practical reason, delivering the promised books, fixing a loose board on the steps, checking if she needed firewood as the autumn nights grew cooler. Katherine found herself looking forward to these visits more than she cared to admit. There was something about Nathan Blackwell that drew her: his quiet competence, his unexpected thoughtfulness, the intelligence behind those blue eyes. But she reminded herself that she had come west to build a new life, not to lose her heart to the first man who showed her kindness. On a crisp October afternoon, 3 weeks after her arrival, Katherine dismissed her students early. Parent conferences had gone well the previous evening, and she felt she'd earned their trust. The children had made remarkable progress already, particularly Tommy Connolly, whose initial skepticism had transformed into enthusiasm for learning. She was gathering her materials when the door opened, and Nathan stepped inside. He wore his customary riding clothes, but his expression was unusually hesitant. "Miss Fletcher," he began, twisting his hat in his hands, "I was wondering if you might like to join me for dinner at the hotel restaurant tonight. They've got a new cook from San Francisco who's supposed to be pretty good." Katherine looked up in surprise. This wasn't a casual visit, It was an invitation, a courtship gesture. Her pulse quickened. "Mr. Blackwell, are you asking me to dine with you?" "I reckon I am." He met her eyes directly. "I've enjoyed getting to know you these past weeks. Thought we might talk without schoolhouse business or town emergencies interrupting." She should refuse. A schoolteacher had to be above reproach, especially in a small town. But the thought of spending an evening in his company was too appealing to resist. "I would like that," she said finally. "What time shall I expect you?" Relief and pleasure crossed his face. 6 o'clock. I'll come to your cabin. 6 it is." After he left, Katherine hurried back to her cabin to prepare. The blue dress she'd worn to the social was her best option. She bathed using her precious supply of lavender-scented soap, dressed carefully, and arranged her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual teaching coiffure. As she waited for Nathan's arrival, Katherine found herself unaccountably nervous. This was hardly her first dinner with a gentleman, though it had been years since she'd accepted such an invitation. After her father's disgrace, the suitors who had once called at their Boston home had disappeared, and those who remained had intentions that were far from honorable. Nathan arrived precisely at 6, looking transformed in a proper suit and string tie. His hair was still damp from washing, and he'd trimmed his beard. The effort he'd made touched Katherine deeply. "You look beautiful, Miss Fletcher," he said as she opened the door. "Thank you. You're quite presentable yourself, Mr. Blackwell." He smiled at her teasing tone and offered his arm. "Shall we?" The Imperial Hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Virginia City, with white tablecloths and actual glass windows. Heads turned as they entered, curious gazes following them to their table. Katherine was acutely aware of the impression. They were creating the new schoolteacher dining with the territory's most eligible bachelor. Once seated, however, the opinions of others seemed less important. Nathan ordered wine, and they fell into easy conversation. He told her about his ranch, the challenges of raising cattle in the high desert, and his hopes for expanding his operation. Katherine shared stories of her students' progress and her gradual adjustment to Western life. "You've settled in well," he observed. "Some Easterners never adapt." "I've found it surprisingly easy to feel at home here," she admitted. "There's a straightforwardness to life in Virginia City that I appreciate." "And what about life before? You rarely mention Boston." Katherine tensed slightly, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. "There wasn't much to leave behind." Nathan studied her face. "Family troubles." She considered deflecting the question but found herself wanting to be honest with him. "My father was a banker. 3 years ago his bank failed. There were accusations of impropriety. He took his own life rather than face prosecution." The words emerged with difficulty. "My mother had passed years earlier, and suddenly I was alone, with no money and a tarnished name." Nathan's expression remained compassionate, without the judgment or pity she had grown to dread. "That must have been difficult." "It was." Katherine took a sip of wine. "I had been educated with the expectation of making a suitable marriage. Instead, I found myself needing to support myself. Teaching was the only respectable option available." "And that brought you west." She nodded. "After 2 years teaching in a Boston charity school, I saw the advertisement for this position. A fresh start, away from whispers and sidelong glances. Well, I'm grateful for whatever circumstances brought you here." He reached across the table, briefly touching her hand. "Virginia City is better for having you." The simple sincerity of his words warmed her more than the wine. "Thank you, Nathan." It was the first time she had used his given name, and the intimacy of it hung between them. As they finished their meal, which was indeed impressive by frontier standards, Katherine found herself reluctant for the evening to end. When Nathan suggested a walk before returning to her cabin, she agreed readily. The night was clear and cool, with a crescent moon providing just enough light to see by. They strolled along the boardwalk, past closed shops and the still lively saloons, until they reached the edge of town. Below them, the lights of distant mines twinkled in the darkness. "It's peaceful," Katherine said, drawing her shawl closer against the chill, "despite all the activity." "This is what I love about the West," Nathan replied, his voice low. "Even in the middle of a mining boomtown, you're never far from reminders of how small we are compared to all this." He gestured toward the vast landscape stretching beyond the town limits. They stood in companionable silence, shoulders almost touching. Katherine was intensely aware of his presence beside her, of the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. "Katherine," he said finally, turning to face her, "I've been trying to find the right way to say this." Her heart began to race. "Yes, I care for you, more than I expected to and sooner than makes much sense." His eyes searched hers in the moonlight. "I know you came west to make a new life for yourself, not to be courted by some rancher, but I'd like your permission to call on you properly." Katherine knew she should take time to consider, to weigh the implications for her position in the community, to guard her heart against potential disappointment. Instead, she found herself nodding. "I would like that very much, Nathan." His smile was worth any risk. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he leaned toward her. Katherine closed her eyes, anticipating the gentle press of his lips against hers. But at the last moment, a shout from the direction of town broke the spell. "Mr. Blackwell, Miss Fletcher." Sheriff Connolly's voice carried through the night as he approached. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's trouble. Stage got held up about 5 miles south. Drivers hurt bad and they took the payroll for the Comstock mine." Nathan straightened immediately, his expression shifting from tenderness to concern. "Anyone else hurt?" "No passengers this run, thank God. But the driver needs the doctor, and I'm organizing a posse to go after the bandits." The sheriff looked apologetic. "Need your tracking skills, Nathan." "Of course." He turned to Katherine. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she assured him, though disappointment washed through her. "Go help Sheriff Connolly." He hesitated, then quickly pressed a kiss to her cheek. "I'll come see you when I return." She watched the two men hurry toward the sheriff's office, where lanterns burned bright and horses were already being saddled. The evening that had seemed so perfect just moments ago had come to an abrupt end. Katherine walked back to her cabin alone, her thoughts in turmoil. She had come to Virginia City seeking independence and a fresh start, not romantic entanglement. Yet in just a few short weeks, Nathan Blackwell had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. As she prepared for bed, she wondered what might have happened if the sheriff hadn't interrupted them. The kiss that never was lingered in her imagination as she drifted into restless sleep. The next morning, Katherine found concentration difficult as she taught her lessons. Her students noticed her distraction, exchanging glances when she lost her place in the reading or stared out the window toward the road leading south. "Miss Fletcher." Tommy Connolly raised his hand. "Are you worried about my pa and the posse?" Katherine collected herself. "I'm concerned for everyone's safety, Tommy, but I'm sure your father and the others are very capable." "Pa says Mr. Blackwell's the best tracker in the territory," the boy offered. "Says he can follow a trail where others see nothing." "That's very reassuring," Katherine replied, touched by the boy's attempt to comfort her. "Now, let's return to our arithmetic lesson." The day dragged on with no word from the posse. After dismissing her students, Katherine found herself walking toward the sheriff's office, where Mrs. Connolly was keeping watch. "No news yet," the woman told her with a knowing look. "But they've been gone less than a day. These things take time." Katherine nodded, embarrassed by how transparent her concern must be. Of course. I just wanted to see if there was any information about the injured driver. Doc patched him up. He'll live, though his stage driving days might be over. Mrs. Connolly studied Katherine's face. Nathan's a good man, Miss Fletcher. Best in the territory. Half the unmarried women between here and Carson City have set their caps for him, but he's never shown interest. Until now. Katherine felt her cheeks warm. We're merely friends, Mrs. Connolly. The older woman smiled. If you say so, dear. 2 more days passed with no word from the posse. Katherine maintained her teaching routine, but anxiety gnawed at her. What if Nathan was injured or worse? The territory was dangerous outlaws, harsh terrain, unpredictable weather. 1,000 misfortunes could befall a man, even one as capable as Nathan Blackwell. On the 3rd evening, as she sat at her desk grading arithmetic exercises, a knock came at her door. Heart racing, Katherine hurried to answer it. Nathan stood on her porch, dusty and unshaven with dark circles under his eyes, but wonderfully, blessedly alive. "You're back," she breathed, relief washing through her. "Just got in," he confirmed. "Wanted to see you before even cleaning up." Without thinking, Katherine stepped forward and embraced him, inhaling his scent of leather and horses and sun-warmed earth. After a moment's surprise, his arms came around her, holding her close. "I was worried," she admitted against his chest. "Worried enough to greet me like this. Maybe I should ride out more often." The teasing note in his voice couldn't quite mask his pleasure at her concern. Katherine stepped back, suddenly conscious of how forward her behavior had been. "Did you catch the robbers?" "2 of them. 3rd got away, but we recovered most of the payroll." He looked exhausted but satisfied. "Sheriff's got them locked up tight." "You should rest," she said, noticing how he swayed slightly with fatigue. "You look dead on your feet. I'll sleep soon enough." His eyes held hers. "Wanted to finish our conversation from the other night first." Katherine's pulse quickened. "Which part?" "The part where I was about to kiss you, if memory serves." She should have been scandalized by his directness, but instead found herself smiling. "I believe you're right, Mr. Blackwell. We were interrupted at a rather crucial moment. Mind if we try again?" He stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. Katherine looked into his eyes, seeing the tenderness there, the genuine care that had been missing from every other man's gaze in her experience. "I don't mind at all." This time, there was no interruption. Nathan's lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Katherine had read about kisses in novels, passionate embraces that set heroines' hearts aflame, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. The softness of his mouth against hers, the slight roughness of his beard, the warmth of his hand at her waist all combined to create a sensation both comforting and exhilarating. When they parted, Katherine felt breathless and strangely vulnerable. Nathan searched her face, concern creasing his brow. "Katherine, are you all right?" She nodded, unable to find words. His expression shifted from concern to sudden understanding. "Katherine, was that? Have you never been kissed before?" The heat of embarrassment flooded her cheeks. At 22, her inexperience was unusual, perhaps even suspicious. "I haven't," she admitted finally. "There were suitors in Boston before my father's disgrace, but none that it never felt right." Rather than mockery, Nathan's face reflected wonder. "I'm honored," he said simply. "Though now I wish I'd made a better job of it." A laugh escaped her. "It seemed perfectly adequate to me." "Adequate?" His eyebrow rose in mock offense. "Well, Miss Fletcher, I'll have to do better next time." "Next time," she echoed, hope rising within her, "if you'll permit it." His expression grew serious again. "I meant what I said before. I care for you, Katherine. I'd like to court you properly, with your permission." The prudent part of her mind warned that it was too soon, that she barely knew him, that her position in the community could be compromised. But her heart had already decided. "Yes," she said softly, "I'd like that very much." His smile was brilliant even through his exhaustion. "Then I'll call on you tomorrow after I've had a bath and some sleep. I'll expect you." He kissed her once more, briefly but sweetly, then reluctantly took his leave. Katherine watched him go, her fingertips pressed to her lips, marveling at how completely her life had changed in the span of a month. As autumn deepened into winter, Nathan courted Katherine with a thoroughness that charmed her. He took her on proper drives around the countryside, escorted her to church every Sunday, and visited the schoolhouse often enough to become a familiar presence to her students. For Christmas, he gave her a leather-bound edition of Tennyson's poems, inscribed with a simple message. "To Katherine, who brings poetry to the wilderness. Yours, Nathan." The word "yours" made her heart skip every time she read it. Katherine flourished in her role as teacher, earning the respect of the community and the devotion of her students. Far from hindering her position, her relationship with Nathan seemed to enhance it. The people of Virginia City approved of their most prominent citizen courting their schoolteacher. One crisp January evening, as they sat before the fire in her cabin after sharing a simple meal she had prepared, Nathan turned to her with an unusually serious expression. "I'd like to show you my ranch," he said. "Maybe this weekend if the weather holds." Martha Hollister could chaperone to keep everything proper. Katherine smiled at his consideration for her reputation. "I'd love to see it. You talk about it so often, I feel I should know what a brand looks like by now." "It's not much compared to what you knew in Boston," he said, a rare note of uncertainty in his voice. "Log house, barn, bunkhouse for the hands. Been adding to it bit by bit over the years." "It sounds wonderful," she assured him, touched by his vulnerability. "Truly." He nodded, seeming relieved. "Good, because I've been thinking." "Yes." He took her hand, his calloused thumb tracing circles on her palm. "These months with you have been the happiest of my life, Katherine. I never expected to find someone like you out here." Her heart began to race as she sensed the direction of his words. "I'm not one for flowery speeches," he continued, "but I know what I want, what I need." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I love you, Katherine Fletcher. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Though she had begun to hope for this moment, the reality of it overwhelmed her. "Nathan, A shadow crossed his face at her hesitation. "If it's too soon." "No," she said quickly, squeezing his hand. "It's not that, it's just—" She took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you first, something I've never fully explained about my father." Nathan waited patiently as she gathered her thoughts. "When I said my father's bank failed, that wasn't the whole truth. He embezzled from his clients. Used their money to cover bad investments, thinking he could replace it before anyone noticed." The words were painful to speak aloud. When it came to light, he couldn't face the disgrace. The night before he was to be arrested, he shot himself. She couldn't meet Nathan's eyes, afraid of what she might see there. The Fletcher name became synonymous with dishonor in Boston. "That's why I came west, not just for a fresh start, but because no one would hire me there." "Katherine," Nathan's voice was gentle, "look at me." Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. "You are not your father. His actions were his own, not yours." His grip on her hand tightened. "Out here, we judge people by what they do, not by their kin's mistakes. You've proven yourself a woman of integrity, compassion, and courage. That's who you are to me, to this town." Tears welled in her eyes at his acceptance. "You don't mind being tied to such a name?" "I'd be proud to give you a new one," he smiled. "Though I suspect half my cattle still won't come when called." A laugh burst through her tears. "You're impossible. And you haven't answered my question." Katherine wiped her eyes, her heart full. "Yes, Nathan Blackwell, I will marry you." His kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that made her breath catch. When they finally drew apart, both were flushed and breathless. "I've never—" Katherine began, then stopped, embarrassed. Nathan brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I know. We have time, Katherine. Time for all your firsts." The promise in his eyes made her shiver. "We'll learn together." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Virginia City. Martha Hollister immediately appointed herself wedding coordinator, insisting that the ceremony take place in the church rather than the judge's office. "A proper wedding," she declared. "This town could use a celebration." Katherine wrote to her former roommate in Boston, the one friend who had stood by her after her father's disgrace. To her delight, Eliza responded that she would make the journey west for the wedding, scheduled for early April when the mountain passes would be clear. In February, Nathan took Katherine to see his ranch, with Martha Hollister serving as chaperone. The main house was indeed modest compared to the homes she had known in Boston, but it possessed a sturdy charm that appealed to her. Built of logs with a stone chimney, it stood on a rise overlooking the valley where his cattle grazed. Inside, the furnishings were simple but of good quality, and the walls held bookshelves that brought a smile to Katherine's face. "My mother's influence," Nathan explained, following her gaze. "She taught me to value learning." "It's perfect," Katherine said, meaning it. She could envision their life here, children running across the yard, evenings spent reading by the fire, building something meaningful together. As winter gave way to spring, Katherine divided her time between teaching and preparing for the wedding. The women of Virginia City rallied around her, helping to create a trousseau worthy of their schoolteacher. Nathan's ranch hands, not to be outdone, began work on an addition to the main house, a proper study where Katherine could continue her intellectual pursuits. On the first Saturday in April, 1877, Katherine stood in a small room at the back of the church, wearing a simple white dress that Martha and the other women had helped her make. Eliza, who had arrived the previous day, fussed with the veil attached to Katherine's upswept hair. "He's handsome," Eliza whispered, "and clearly besotted with you. I approve." "I'm glad," Katherine replied, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. "Your opinion matters to me." A knock at the door heralded Sheriff Connolly, who had offered to escort Katherine down the aisle in the absence of her father. "Ready, Miss Fletcher. Everyone's waiting." Katherine took a deep breath. "Ready." The church was filled to capacity, with every resident of Virginia City in attendance. As the first notes of music sounded, played on a newly arrived piano that Nathan had quietly arranged to have shipped from San Francisco, Katherine began her walk toward the future. Nathan stood at the altar, tall and proud in a new suit, his face lighting with joy as he saw her. Behind him, his ranch foreman served as best man, looking uncomfortable in formal attire but beaming with pride for his boss. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with vows that echoed across the frontier church. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Nathan's kiss was reverent, a promise of all that was to come. The celebration afterward was everything Virginia City could muster, tables laden with food, music from every instrument in the territory, and enough goodwill to warm the cool spring evening. Katherine danced first with her husband, then with Sheriff Connolly, and finally with Tommy, who had become one of her favorite students. "Are you leaving us now, Mrs. Blackwell?" the boy asked, serious beyond his 12 years. "Not entirely," she assured him. "I'll finish the school term, and then we'll see what arrangements can be made." Katherine had already discussed with the school board the possibility of continuing to teach, at least until they found a replacement, As the evening wound down, Nathan approached, offering his hand. "Time to go home, Mrs. Blackwell." The title, so new, sent a thrill through her. "Home," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." They left amid cheers and well wishes, riding in a wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers by the schoolchildren. The 3-mile journey to the ranch passed in a blur of anticipation and nervous excitement for Katherine. At the ranch house, Nathan lifted her from the wagon with easy strength. "Welcome home," he said, carrying her across the threshold. Inside, she found the main room transformed. Fresh flowers stood in vases, a fire burned in the hearth despite the mild evening, and new curtains hung at the windows. "The hands wives helped," Nathan explained, seeing her surprise. "Wanted everything perfect for you." "It's lovely," Katherine said, touched by the thoughtfulness. An awkward silence fell between them, both acutely aware of what the night held. Nathan cleared his throat. "Would you like some tea?" Or maybe Katherine gathered her courage and placed a finger against his lips. "Nathan," she said softly, "I'm nervous too, but I love you and I trust you. We'll figure this out together." Relief crossed his face. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Together. That night, with tenderness and patience, Nathan introduced Katherine to the final intimacy of marriage. Her initial apprehension gave way to wonder as they learned each other's bodies, discovering together the physical expression of their love. Afterward, lying in his arms, Katherine felt a profound sense of rightness. "I never imagined such happiness," she whispered into the darkness. Nathan's arms tightened around her. "This is just the beginning." The following months brought adjustments as Katherine balanced her role as Nathan's wife with finishing the school term. She rode to town each morning, taught her students, and returned to the ranch in the evening. The arrangement raised eyebrows among the more traditional residents, but Nathan's support never wavered. "You're a born teacher," he told her. "I won't be the one to take that from you or the children." By June, the school board had found a replacement, a young woman from Sacramento who arrived with impressive credentials and a willingness to live in a mining town. Katherine helped her settle in, introducing her to the students and sharing her lesson plans. With her teaching responsibilities concluded, Katherine turned her attention fully to her role as mistress of the Blackwell Ranch. She transformed the main house with small touches that made it truly a home, planted a vegetable garden that thrived in the high desert soil, and began hosting monthly dinners for the ranch hands and their families. Nathan watched her blossom with evident pride. "You've taken to ranch life better than I dared hope," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "It suits me," Katherine replied, her hand resting on his. "Far better than Boston society ever did." In the autumn, Katherine discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled Nathan with a mixture of joy and protective concern that Katherine found endearing if occasionally stifling. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she reminded him when he insisted on hiring additional help for the house. "Humor me," he replied, kissing her forehead. "First-time father's prerogative." As her body changed with the advancing pregnancy, Katherine found a new kind of beauty in the experience. Nathan's reverent touch on her growing belly, his whispered words to their unborn child, deepened the bond between them. Their son, William James Blackwell, was born on a snowy May morning in 1878, with Martha Hollister serving as midwife. He had his father's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair that stood straight up despite Katherine's attempts to smooth it. "He's perfect," Nathan whispered, holding his son for the first time, tears unashamedly tracking down his cheeks. "Katherine, you're magnificent." Motherhood brought challenges. Katherine hadn't anticipated sleepless nights, moments of overwhelming responsibility, the constant worry that she might somehow fail this tiny person who depended on her completely. But it also brought a love so fierce and protective that it took her breath away. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, as comfortable cradling his son while reviewing the ranch accounts as he was negotiating cattle prices or tracking strays. He insisted on taking the baby for a few hours each day so Katherine could rest or pursue her own interests. "A mind like yours needs feeding," he said when she protested. "Besides, the boy should know his father as well as his mother." As William grew from infant to toddler to active boy, the Blackwell Ranch prospered. Nathan's careful management and forward thinking expanded their holdings, and by 1882, they were among the most successful ranchers in the territory. That summer, as they celebrated William's 4th birthday, Nathan surprised Katherine with news. "I've bought the Harrington place," he told her as they watched their son chasing fireflies in the dusk. "The house needs work, but the land adjoins ours to the east." "That's wonderful," Katherine said. "More grazing for the herd." "Actually," Nathan looked slightly nervous, "I was thinking we might turn the house into a school for the ranch children and others nearby. They're too far from town to attend regularly." Katherine stared at him. "A school," he nodded, "with a proper teacher. Someone who's been missing her calling, perhaps." Emotion welled in her throat. Throughout their marriage, Nathan had supported her intellectual pursuits, encouraging her correspondence with educational journals and her continuing self-education. But this gesture, recognizing her passion for teaching and finding a way to incorporate it into their life together, moved her deeply. "You do that for me, for you, for William and the other children, for the future of this territory." He took her hand. "What do you think?" "I think," she said, blinking back tears, "that I fell in love with the right man." The ranch school opened that September with 6 students: William, the children of 3 ranch hands and 2 from neighboring homesteads. Katherine taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and history, just as she had in Virginia City, but with the freedom to adapt her methods to the unique needs of frontier children. As the years passed, the school grew, eventually requiring a purpose-built structure and by 1890, a second teacher to assist Katherine. Their family grew as well, with the addition of twin girls Elizabeth and Margaret in 1883 and another son, Robert, in 1886. Through it all, Nathan and Katherine's partnership deepened. They weathered the inevitable challenges of ranch life: drought years, harsh winters, market fluctuations, with a unity that impressed everyone who knew them. Their home became a gathering place not just for their immediate family, but for the entire community that had formed around the Blackwell Ranch. On a warm evening in 1896, 20 years after Katherine had first stepped down from the stagecoach in Virginia City, she and Nathan sat on their porch, watching their youngest son practicing roping in the yard. William, now 18, had recently left for college in California, the first Blackwell to pursue higher education, but Katherine suspected, not the last. The twins, 13 and headstrong, were helping in the kitchen, their voices raised in good-natured argument drifting through the open windows. "Did you ever imagine this?" Nathan asked, his hand finding hers as it had countless times over the years. His hair was silvered at the temples now, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his gaze still held the same tenderness that had first captured her heart. Katherine looked out over their domain, the prosperous ranch, the school that now educated children from miles around, the community they had helped build. "Never," she admitted. "Boston Katherine couldn't have dreamed of such happiness." "You've come a long way from that proper Eastern schoolteacher who'd never been kissed," he teased gently. She laughed, leaning against his shoulder. And you've given me a lifetime of firsts. Not quite a lifetime yet, he corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. We've still got plenty of years ahead, Mrs. Blackwell. Promise, promise. His arm tightened around her shoulders. We're just getting started. As the sun set behind the mountains they both loved, Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the lonely, disgraced daughter of a Boston banker to beloved wife, mother, teacher, and cornerstone of a thriving community. It was a transformation she could never have anticipated but would forever cherish. That night, as she had every night for 20 years, Katherine fell asleep in Nathan's arms, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought her west, for the courage to begin again, and for the man who had shown her that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a simple admission. I've never been kissed.